Hey everybody, so now we're doing the one that is highly anticipated and that everyone's been waiting for. It is Pucking Around by Emily Rath. So much to say.
So much to say, but let's start off with some good stuff. Let's start off easy, right? I'm going to give a generalization, just so some people, if they don't know what this book is about. It's 600 pages. Again, 600 pages of steamy romance where we follow Rachel Price, who's an incoming physical therapist for this hockey team. And she finds herself in like a love triangle with 3 hockey players. But before we begin, I just want to mention, I found an interesting article, which I hope will keep Mike open-minded, about romance books. So as we, just to guide the conversation so we're not seeming too critical of the book. So the Times published an article named Embrace Your Love for Romance Novels, It's Good For You, and it was by Misha Battle, who's a sex therapist and a dating coach. Kind of the takeaways from this article kind of notes that in itself, romance novels help boost responsive desires by helping individuals get into the right mind of sex. They find that romance novels help transport readers from their daily routine, stimulating sexual interest through imaginative and romantic scenarios. Okay. In modern romance novels, you find that there's more diverse voices or subgenres, which include many people of color, those who represent or who are LGBTQ+. And then there's also some representation with individuals with disabilities, which helps readers identify and relate to characters within the genre. Reading romance novels also can help readers understand their own sexual needs and fantasies in a safe space. But overall, what Miss Battles was trying to say is that there's a therapeutic potential of romance novels in exploring and understanding one's personal desires and enhancing sexual connections with themselves and potentially one's partner. So with that in mind, let's go into Pucking Around. And for me, I read the novella. The novella was like 100 pages. So I already had a gist going into reading this book what the general idea would be. What we learned is that this Rachel Price woman, she got a fellowship. She was kind of like a last minute hire because someone dropped out. So she's like, yes, she was going to drop everything. And then she goes down to Jacksonville, Florida to be the physical therapist for this new team, hockey team that was being developed. And she was going to be on the physical therapy team. And she's described as this confident woman. She kind of alludes from the beginning that she's a woman who came from a wealthy family because her dad was this rock star, and she kind of had this past where she was like a wild child, and she's kind of like redeemed her image and her character. And she did that by going back to school and becoming top of her class. Like she's all like you start off with the main character who already quote unquote defeated her demons and now is already excelling in her field. You find out she already had kind of like a one-night fling with one of the hockey players, but she didn't know that he was like part of this team. But within the first few chapters, you quickly learn that it was him. And then as you go through the book, not only does she have a fling with Jake, but then you find that she has immediate feelings for best friend Caleb. So,
for Jake's best friend.
Caleb. Yeah, Jake's best friend Caleb. And conveniently, it was also insta love there. And then when you get halfway through the book, you find that she also has insta love for Amari, who's like the goalie for the team. And there's a lot of sex, which is fine. I don't mind that. But I think my biggest critique is that after the first 100 pages, the sex scenes seem monotonous and it was getting like crazier and crazier. I think just for the effect of writing to make it seem like crazy. But the whole time the threat of this book is that like she may lose her job if they find out. And you're like, well, no, duh. Like if you're a person of authority and you're sleeping with these hockey players and you're also like their medical physician, that's like red tape number 1. You're not supposed to sleep with your patients. So I feel like the risk that was presented in the book was quickly thrown away because she wanted to fulfill her sexual desires with these 3 hockey players. So I'll stop there's more to say. I have a lot of things to say, but let's let Mike, Mike has been waiting for a long time to talk about his feelings about the book.
So I went back and forth about trying to not be like, there's just so much to criticize. And I just don't, I want to try not being that person for once. So to me, this book, this is the first romance. Like not the first romance, because I've read Tom Robbins. For me, that's romance done really well. That's romance to me. It's erotic in a way, but the characters are just so much more fun and so much more real and so much more interesting. They're not stereotypical in my mind. And the story is interesting. And the stakes are real. And I don't want to go into those books too much, but like, that's interesting to me. What it comes down to for me is two things. One is that it's a fantasy, but in the sense of like a teenage sex addict's fantasy, where the stakes are never high, but they feel like the world, it's an existential crisis because something, silly, like something that happens to most adults, they lose their job because of something or another. But then, most people recover, like that's not very high stakes to me. And on top of that, it's a scenario where the main character is like, she's constantly worried. Oh my God, this could ruin it. This is all I care about, is having this program go well and this experience go well. But then she just is like, I'll risk it at every second and every turn for literally no reason.
For love.
And all the characters talk and act like they're like 14 or 15 years old, even though they're all supposed to be in their mid to late 20s, early 30s. And they all think to themselves, I'm this kind of person. And then they do the silliest, most opposite thing they can at every turn. This is supposed to be this sex positive thing. And that leads me, because none of it's based on reality. And that leads me to the next thing for me. Which is you brought up that article, and it claims that it's all about sex positivity. But I think that as someone from the outside looking in, when I learn about these, about more about sexuality and understanding LGBTQ plus, and, expand my mind in that way, not even if it's something that I'm not necessarily into or that I completely get the appeal of, it's interesting to see how people, feel about it. And I learned about more about consent in general, more about how traumatic it can be for someone to be forced into a position where they're kind of pressured into doing sexual acts that they may not be comfortable with. And how in these sexual subcultures, like with BDSM and with like things that get really kinky, that it's important to set up boundaries before you get into it. Make sure you're on the same page. Make sure that, you're willing to respect the person's boundaries and all the terrible things that can happen that is seen and unseen to people when that's violated. In this book, none of that happens. None of that is even brought up. No. It's literally just people almost being R-worded or coerced into doing these intense sexual acts. And then when they perform them, all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing I've ever done that's ever happened to me. I just want to do this 24/7 now. And there's also the idea in this book that they all are just these sex addicted, sex obsessed, deviants, basically. Where it's not the act that they're performing that's weird. It's that they're just thinking about it 24/7. Every single character. A lot of even when it doesn't make sense. And it's just so unrealistic. And I feel like it does the opposite of promoting sex positivity.
Yeah. Well, yeah, to basically, I think, for example, if we start with the first couples that came out at the beginning of the book, we have Caleb, who at first it's gay, but potentially bi. And then we have Jacob, who initially the character we're seeing as straight, and then we have Rachel, who, to our knowledge, she's a straight character. And then you see that a lot of times you can see, it was mentioned that Caleb has feelings for Jake, but Jake has always had feelings for Rachel, and it kind of feels like Rachel kind of pressures Jacob to get into sexual situations with Caleb. Like I feel like she kind of toys with Jacob and be like, well, I like Caleb and I like you and I want you both and I'm not going to choose. So we're going to get into a sexual relationship together. And if we're going to get in a sexual relationship together, she kind of like in the kitchen scene where this is Jake's first time performing, I guess, fellatio on another man who happens to be his best friend. And the whole time she's like narrating like the confliction that he feels, because you can tell that throughout the whole book, you learn that he kept saying, I love her, I want her to be my wife, marry me, marry me, marry me. And she kind of denies him, says, well, I don't want to marry you because I love this other guy. So he kind of accepts his friend into this relationship. And then she kind of like on the side kind of be like, well, you know, Jake, you do love Caleb in that way. And like, and then throughout the book, you hear Jake kind of, in some ways, being conflicted in his sexuality. And then in the end, he's like, well, I'm bi too. But it's like done in such a flippant way. Like, I wouldn't mind if the character came out on his own. But I feel like it was Rachel pushing him to make him bi so she can have like this threesome relationship for herself. So I felt like it was like not organic. It was forced.
Yeah, all the men are like zombies, where they go, oh, we love you more than anything. And then she's like, okay, do this thing that you've never done and that you clearly express that would make you, it makes you uncomfortable. And they're like, okay. And then they do it and they're like, I love this. Oh, thanks for the courage. Like, it's insane. It's insane. You have Caleb, the friend, who was like this phenom who got his leg messed up after getting hit into the boards by an opposing player, and his career got derailed, and he only thinks 24/7 about sex.
but only with like, but Rachel's the only woman that he slept with another one before because he hid who he was, and he had what they call bunnies, which is girls.
They used to like tag team hockey groupies. I would expect to learn about poly, like we get actual insight into poly relationships, but we didn't get that either.
It's clearly an author who had no idea what poly. Like her assumption of what a poly relationship was. That's hot hockey players.
That's my point. It was this it was this author's just wet dream, basically. If people enjoy this thing and get their kicks, then that's fine. But this is true horror to me. This is true horror. It's not jump scares. It's not vampires. It's not whatever. It's this book.
There was a lot of huffing from the living room when he was reading this book, and him walking into the room, like a lot of harumping of him, like having issues.
This is the most difficult, easy read I've ever had in my entire life. Just everything is just, nothing is based on reality, but there's an attempt at everything. There's an attempt at sounding like a...
She kind of threw everything in there.
Yeah, like there's texting, except the dialogue is out of date. Like it's out of date, or the author completely misunderstood one of the terms or phrases that young people use, like not understanding it somehow.
Was it the skulls?
It was the skulls, and I'm not going to go into it, but
just go into
it. There's a part early on where the author doesn't seem to understand what it actually means to like the young people that are actually using it. And there's another instance where I forgot the song because I don't want to remember any of this. I want amnesia so badly. But there's a part where she's like, the main character hears a song and she's like, oh, this is my jam at like a karaoke night. And the song is like it's like the modern equivalent of like saying a Nickelback song in 2004 is your favorite song. We can go to the sex scenes though. Scenes.
I just have another issue. So like another issue that I had, and Mike thought it was hilarious, but he liked how I pointed it out. So Rachel Price, right? She's not from a poor poor family. She's from a well-off family. The daddy has private jets, multiple mansions because he's a rock star. But what irked me as a professional woman, because I too have a 9-to-5 and a job, and she, like, every time, like, she mentions about how, like, she's always in the basic mom outfit of, sorry for basic moms, but she's wearing Lululemon leggings, Old Navy flip-flops, and, like, baggy t-shirts, right? But then all of a sudden, when she goes to the gallery, she's like, I have this Dior dress from 4 years ago. It's God, I'm a bombshell. And I'm like, you're telling me you have rockstar money, and you're wearing black leggings and a baggy t-shirt, but then you still have this Dior dress and Louis Vuitton shoes? And then there was an example when they were going to Ohio, and she was seeing her mentor, whoever he was. She was, like, getting changed to work, to be presented in the office. And basically, her quick outfit was still the black leggings. She took off her Old Navy flip-flops and put on some chunky heels, but then, like, a baggy shirt, and she was office ready. I'm like, none of this, like, clearly, like, either the author didn't know or someone didn't know that, like, that's not... If she's, like, a physical therapist going to see her mentor and working in a hospital setting, that is not work-appropriate attire. And you're telling me that she has daddy's money and this is all she can get. I don't believe it.
Right. Well, that's another idea, is that this book is supposedly about empowerment, but then you have a woman who's clearly conventionally attractive because every single guy in the world just automatically, once they see her, just thinks about sex with her 24/7 and would cut off,
She's
a body
the
part to be
Aphrodite
able
of the
to...
whole team.
Right.
They propped her up as being this hot bombshell.
I know.
So, like,
with pouty lips and, like,
big titties, pouty lips, long flowy black hair, curvy body. So it's like a Taylor Swift song.
Right. So, I mean, let's get into the sex scenes, I guess.
Do we want to?
So as someone who has never read, I mean, like I said, I've read stories, like there's some Tom Robbins stories where it gets really erotic, and I mean, I was turned on by some of the stuff that happened in there. But
Tom Robbins or in Fucking Around?
Tom Robbins.
Okay.
I was expecting myself inside to feel things that I had never felt before reading this, this novel, especially the sex scenes, not reading like a smut book. That didn't happen. That didn't happen for me. It was so unrealistic and so extreme. And again,
it was on fantasy.
I think about 50 Shades of Grey because I didn't read the novel, but I watched the movie with you.
Yeah.
And in the movie, it's separated. They come out with these terms and these negotiations that both people, even if they don't necessarily want to sign it, that they do it, right? Mm-hmm. And then they go into this room that when you're in this room, you can act this way, but when you're outside of the room, you go back to your normal life. And I kind of thought that made sense, Mm-hmm. But in this, it goes from 0 to 100 with these sexual acts. And it was just so unrealistic. And that kind of leads me to thinking about, like, who is this for? Who is this really for? And to me, the only thing that I can think of are, like, really immature adults that have had real experiences, but prefer this kind of fantastical phenomenon where it's just like, every guy not only wants to be with them,
straight or gay
wants to be with them,
which is offensive, by the way.
But also, like, is willing to literally change their entire lives
for one woman,
for someone that they don't really know at all. And I mean, to me, the concept of, like, love at first sight or like true love instantly when you see somebody, to me, it's a feeling, it's an emotion that someone might have, but there's usually something very specific that triggers it when you're thinking about something that's actually, like, real. And usually it only leads to going up and talking to the person, not like going from meeting them to all of a sudden you're having this wild kinky sex without having talked about it, Yeah. Because for, like, smut and spicy romance, I really feel like she could have actually turned it into a real story with real characters where we actually get insight. Like, we actually get insight into what it's like to be a professional hockey player, what it's like to be bisexual or gay in a very macho, very male,
other
male
than stating it.
Right,
And that's another thing
male-dominated
that the
sports.
author does too. She doesn't let that her writing kind of tell the story. She kind of she tells you, literally the characters talk out their problems instead of showing it. Does that make sense?
Right.
Everything is narrated.
Every time a character expresses that they're uncomfortable with a situation, whether it's sexually or in just their relationship outside, it always becomes Rachel convincing them, you just need to dig deep and find yourself. You want this. She's so manipulative. All the characters are manipulative and scheming, but she is the most. But when I say that, that's not a feature of the book. That's a bug. That was not intentional. And I know this is the case because the beginning of the book, the dedication in the book, and this is also extremely insulting given the context, is that
what does it say?
To the Jakes everywhere who want to be loved, the Calebs everywhere who want to be seen, and the Ilmaris everywhere who just want a place to call home. Every single character in this book is insanely objectified, insanely manipulated.
And she's playing on tropes for each of the characters.
Exactly. And for no benefit. It's not, I don't think it's purposeful. I really don't, because everything in the prologue and everything about this is about body positivity and sexual enlightenment and awakening and understanding, people that are maybe a little different that happen to be in the hockey world.
Even looking to the tropes, here written as hockey romance, why choose, friends to lovers, insta love.
Well,
and then for tags, I don't know what the acronyms are because I'm old, but it's hockey romance, romantic comedy.
I'll help you out. Male, female, male, male, male,
male,
female, male, female, male.
Thank you.
Don't ask me how I know that.
Or romantic comedy, insta love, friends to lovers, queer awakening, too much sex, don't poke the bear, golden retriever. Everyone has tattoos. Baby girl, bend over, daddy, finish. 101.
Okay, so Jen, you read a lot of smut and you watch a lot of BookTube. I personally feel like, and I wonder how you feel about this after reading this book, because this is the greatest example of this to me, is that when they call it, it's an insta love, queer awakening, golden retriever, smut novel. Mm-hmm. To me, they're just putting names to really crappy tropes and really crappy writing, basically. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's not poorly written. It's a teenage mind melding fantasy.
Yeah.
That's what this comes off to me as.
Yes, I do read romance. I do love romance. Again, there's a lot of tropes within romance. There's enemies to lovers, there's insta love, there's workplace romance, which is also an example of. But and I don't mind tropes, but I think what made this book basically she threw everything in the kitchen sink to try to make it appeal to a vast audience and threw in the sports aspect. And since this book came out, I personally feel like there's been now a growth in the sports romance where now we have football player love. Not so much polyamorous, but now romance genre is centered around sports, and they can live out their Avril Lavigne or Taylor Swift dream where you're now the band geek with the sports guy.
That's what that's my point.
Exactly. But I think this in particular, this book everything is thrown in there. All the tropes. Everything is thrown in here. The sex didn't do anything. The scenes didn't do anything for me. It's the combinations, you can only do so much. It's just I just feel like I read better romances than this one, or maybe than this. And come to find out, this is a series. Hooray. So, and it seems like each book is following a different character. I think the second book follows Tess. So
it just promotes stereotypes in the opposite direction. That's all to me. Men watch porn and they believe that a lot of that is reality. And then they go out and search for that. And I feel like this is just another extreme, another end of the spectrum.
Another form of sexual escapism.
Right. And I to me, romance is not just saying I'm going to throw everything away without context for this woman, especially when the book makes it clear that it's completely about sex.
There's no there's no character growth. You don't see in the end you can say the characters grow to love each other, and surprise, surprise, she loses her job but gets it back immediately because all of a sudden the whole sports team and field, ESPN, everyone's accepting of the polyandrous relationship.
And it's so shallow too. It's so shallow. It's not real. None of it is real. This is another reason why to me it's promoting this false idea of love and romance and what's attractive, because all the guys do is focus on her. That's what turns them on, or her boobs, or her curves, or all that turns her on, or the gay character or the bi character is the pecs or the monster size. And all the guys, the goalie of the team, who's the oldest one, who's this Viking traditionalist who one woman only, but then he slowly over 3 weeks goes to I could sit here watching. Yeah. It's
it's also the pet names also irked me the most. My angel, my devil. I'm ugh.
I didn't want to use the word cringe, but everything about this book is cringe. But it's just it's so stereotypical, I think that people, when they grow up and they mature or they experience different things, a lot of them shed that, where they get turned on, you get turned on by these smaller things. If Rachel was the only sex addicted, obsessed character, then that would make more sense to me, because then it's an uncut gems scenario, in the movie, where you're seeing when you see a good story about a gambling addict, you understand that they really desperately don't want to be that person, because they want to be there for their family. They don't want to lose everything or have to face the consequences, but they can't stop themselves. But in this book, everyone is like that. There is zero depth. They all talk the same. They all talk the same way. They all think about the exact same thing 24/7. They all get whatever they want. Or the compromise is something so out of character that it's just laughable.
I think that the thing that I also want to highlight, as Mike highlighted a lot, is the shallowness of the characters, where we get a backstory of Caleb, who, as Mike mentioned, busted his knee. He doesn't drink alcohol because he kind of became an addict due to learning that he can no longer be on his dream team. He's now watching his friend live out his dream, so he became an addict. Now he's recovered. And then you have Rachel, who's also a recovering addict, which I think could be an interesting storyline if fleshed out. But it was just mentioned as here's a little, I'll give you, the author gave you a little something that potentially could be developed into storyline, but kind of laid flat. And also if he's a recovering addict and she's a recovering addict, she's talking about going out drinking 2 bars, and but at the same time you're but aren't you a recovering addict from alcohol? Which kind of another thing that irked me.
I have zero confidence that the sequels to this, the other books in the series, are going to be written any differently. So what's your rating? How many Kisas?
I gave it 1 Kisa. Nothing to add. It is 1 Kisa.
I'm going to give it a 1.5, just because I'm not going to give something 0, and because who knows, maybe they'll pick a worse book.
Maybe. Thanks.
I want to leave it open.
So how many sexy chilies would you give this book?
Sexy chilies?
How spicy was the book?
I mean, for me,
collectively,
I would give it a 2. I would give it a 2. To me, this is not spice, it is hot.
Yeah.
And while you're eating food, you pour a lot of hot sauce on your food because you only want to taste hot sauce. Then okay, I guess. But to me, there's no nuance, there's no subtlety. It's not spice. There's
nothing romantic. You're not wrong. If you're a person who don't like smut in your book, this is not the book for you. I give this a 3 because, again, as I mentioned before, it's very monotonous. It's repetitive. It's just thrown in there for, I feel no reason, just because all of a sudden the people had a burst of energy and then they're going off into a room snooing.
Only a 3?
I give it only a 3.
I really don't understand who this is for. I really don't. I feel it's literally just a brain rot money grab.
Yeah, I mean,
in book form.
Yeah, I think this author, she independently published this book. She got very lucky through the social media marketing and enough of people on TikTok pushed it, got it, and then all of a sudden kind of riding this wave of people liking this book. And I don't blame her. She's getting her money. But I think to say, I mean, it's not a bestseller, New York bestseller. It's basically the best-selling TikTok hockey romance. So apparently there's a need for it, and it opened this whole sports genre. If you like erotica, because I think there's also categories like erotica. If you like erotica, romance books, this could be for you. Otherwise, I don't know who else, as you mentioned, who would like this book.
Yeah, I just I mean, this kind of thing happens where a book becomes popular and sells a lot, and it's just, I mean, I'm glad we read a really terrible book finally. If you disagree, then, leave comments. My mind is open. Maybe there's something that I'm missing here.
Or recommend a book that's actually a good romance book that you think we should try. Drop it in the comments as well.
Yeah, let us know.
Well, with that being said, can I finally talk about the controversy?
Sure.
So apparently there is some controversy around this book. As we know, the book got popular on TikTok. And there were some people who kind of developed a fandom, especially around this book. And a lot of people on the side were trying to do side casting, like what an NHL player would you cast? And there was this one woman in particular, Kiara Lewis, who kind of rose to fame on TikTok by casting NHL players to be casted for this book. And one of the popular picks that were kind of like you would say would be the lead was the Swiss player called Alex Weinberg, who at the time was for the Seattle Kraken. Now he plays for the Sharks, but at the time when he was with the Kraken, the team itself kind of saw how popular Lewis was making their team, because she was making all these videos about how good looking he was, and he's the main character, and all these women were finally getting into the team. So they decided to fly her out because they happened to make the playoffs. And then what happened was her and some other female commenters were making a lot of rude comments to him when he was on the ice that were very sexual. And then the wife, who was also in the stands, felt very offended because she was there listening to these comments and how these women were basically going wild for her husband. Mind you, he's just trying to do his job and play. But these other women were just essentially being rabid. So their videos were taken down, comments were made back and forth. But it just showed how quickly people took this book, started doing their own casting, and actually were harassing NHL players. I think even on the team, they actually on their social tags would say BookTok, so people would find them, which helped them out for, I guess, ticket sales. I think it kind of stopped now, but at the time when this book was at its height, marketing tried to run with it, and I think it kind of blew back in their faces.
I don't think it blew back in their faces.
You don't think so?
No. And a lot of sports fans are rabid. So,
but to say sexual things about a player as he's working with the family there, don't you think?
Well, it's more about the fans. Yeah, the team doesn't care. I mean, I feel bad for his wife, but if you go to a football game, they invite their families and their friends to games. They invite their kids, and there's a fan behind them screaming if they make a bad play. Mm-hmm. That they should, all kinds of.
But that's about
things.
The game.
I mean,
the comments are made about the game. These were comments about what she wanted to do in bed with this player.
Well, I mean,
there's a difference. This is just saying what they would do sexually to a person.
I mean, that doesn't sound like a controversy. There are women. There was controversy. There are women. There are people. There are women who at baseball games, even recently, have flash players to try to distract them, and then they get ejected. The woman who does it. Mm-hmm. It's, to me, it's not a controversy. I mean, it sucks for the wife having to hear it, or the kids, or any people, I guess, that are sensitive to that. They just want to go to the game to watch the game and not have to listen to those things. But usually when people are out of hand, security gets called and they get removed.
But what if it's different if the team had these people come in to do promotion for them? There's a boundary.
I mean, there. I think it was a silly practice. I don't think anyone should be propping this book. I mean, good for her, good for the author getting paid and for hopefully, making a lot of money off it. But to me, it's not, it's a nothing.
It's a nothing?
Yeah.
So no controversy here.
I just feel like if you're reading a book, you're probably casting the characters in your head. And if you mostly think about sex or it's a romance book, you're probably going to pick people that you would want to have sex with yourself.
In your head.
Yeah. So, I mean, and people become obsessive, you know?
True, that's true. It was seen as a
It's
controversy
something
in
that-
the BookTok world.
It's something that happened. But I'm also sure that a lot of people that showed up didn't actually read the book. They probably saw the post about the book, thought it was funny.
Mm-hmm.
I have a theory that a huge percentage of people that talk about any book haven't actually read it. I 1,000% believe that.
Interesting. We'll see what people say in the comments.
Yeah, if you disagree, please,
disagree.
please let me know, because I have that theory.
So I believe that people do read it. However,
Or don't finish it.
yeah, they probably didn't finish it.
To me, DNFing, which means did not finish, is not reading a book.
I think it is. I think if
Especially-
you gave the book a chance and you read at least halfway through the book, you tried your best, I think you should count it as
I don't.
read and did not like.
I don't. We have some interesting things coming up, including a book by a truly independent author that's local to us in New York City, and a couple other books that will be pretty interesting too. So keep watching.
Yeah, keep watching. Again, we post the first Sunday of every month. So in the meantime, if you want to get notified, please ring that bell, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you like or don't like about what we're doing so we can try to improve our channel. Do that in the comments.
Also, if you are watching this and you would like a more comprehensive breakdown that's really not safe for work and that goes into the nitty-gritty of these, if enough people are interested, then we can do that. All right, thank you, and check us out next time.
See you next time.